4 years ago, I'm talking to a friend of mine. He calls me, says, I've got to see you. I said, okay, we found a time in the calendar, and I said, what is it? Tell me, what's the problem? And he said, my boss is an idiot. My prime minister's a disaster. This country's horrible. And there are all these problems around me, and I just don't know how to go on. This guy served in the U.S. military, so you would think that he would not be faced with challenges like that. So I said, sit down, let's talk a little bit. And we started going through some questions. And I asked him, do you do this? No. Do you do that? No. Do you do that? No. And for every question I posed to him, and we'll talk about that in a minute, his answer was no. And I said, well, look, we've simplified your problem. You don't have a problem with your boss. You don't have a problem with the government. You don't have a problem with the prime minister. You have a problem with life. And until you fix those problems, which you have, and that's the exciting thing about it, you have 100% control over. If you can get that engine started in your life, you may not believe me now, but you will later, that your problem with the prime minister will disappear. Your problem with your boss will disappear. And your problem with your country or whoever else is in your life will disappear. And so we went through a plan, and I want to talk about that because I've had experience. I seek opportunity to work with people. Even though I'm a business guy, my background is in economics. So I'm involved in a bunch of companies here in Hungary, and I've got technologies that I'm working on. But I also like to see people develop. So several years ago, after having given many, many speeches, I thought about where could I possibly go to motivate people who are undermotivated under normal circumstances in life. And so as I sat in my office at ILead, I said, well, why don't I try to give a motivational speech to people who are in jail? That would be interesting. And so I went through the process. I called the Hungarian jail system, and I got permission. First they said, I have no idea who you should speak with. But they actually called me back the next day, and that took me 4 months. And then I had a letter in my hand that I was able to go to a youth correctional facility. If any of you are Hungarian, I know many of you are, it's in TATA. Has anybody here, by the way, been in jail? Voluntarily. You have. Okay. So if you ever go into jail, it's really an interesting experience because it's like no man's land. Once you go in the front door, you can't go out. And you can't go in further until they give you permission. And you'll normally in life, when we don't have information, if there's an information vacuum, we will create the information, and just quick guess, is that information positive or negative? Almost always negative. I have a friend of mine who deathly fears flying. And she was flying into Chicago one night, and as the plane was, it was kind of a little bit late, and as it turned, one of the wings went into the cloud. She pushed the stewardess button showed up, big smile on her face. Yes, may I help you? Where did the engine go? She said, I don't understand. The engine was here a moment ago, and it's gone. And because she was deathly afraid, she immediately assumed that the engine had fallen off, and she was actually doing a public service and notifying the stewardess, hopefully that she would share that information with the pilot. But we go through life like this, and we don't even realize the fact that we don't have the information. We start to see these little fears, and they slowly, like mud or oil in a pipe, it starts to build up, or in your cardiovascular system, things start to settle down. All of a sudden, over time, you start to realize you're losing steam, you're losing power. And so I've been working with this many kids. I've got actually a group of kids now. The youngest is 12 and the oldest is 30, and I'm going to put them on stage. These are really smart kids. And I'm teaching them the ability to take that knowledge in their head and be able to share it. So I'm teaching them the skills of public speaking so they can get on stage and take that incredibly complicated information in their head and share it with people like me who's not as smart as they are. Because I may have money or power or access to that gate, and they need to be able to convince me. So what are those 4 areas, right? A person can ask, what in the world are those 4 areas that I myself have control over? Because as long as I try to focus on the areas I don't have control over, then I will feel frustrated. and I will feel like somebody else controls my destiny. I don't want anybody else to control my destiny. I want to control my destiny. I want to control my destiny as a human being, as a boss, as a leader, as a father, as a citizen of this country. I want to decide what I end up doing with my life and not let anybody else dictate to me what I'm capable of. And I know we've all met, we've had teachers. I had a teacher in college. Every time I wrote a paper and handed it in, she failed me. She said, "You're not creative." And so from 22 on, I was convinced I'm not creative. Who the hell is she to say I am or I'm not creative? It took me 20 years to figure out she was wrong. Nobody will tell me that I'm not creative. And nobody will tell my son or my daughter they are not creative. Because I make sure I reinforce that in them, that don't listen to that kind of information, because it's more about that person than it is about you. So let's talk about fourth. I believe in simplicity. So we're going to talk about four things, and you're going to leave today, and if you promise, I'm going to challenge you, if you promise to dedicate the next 30 days and just try it. You don't have to agree with me. I'm an economist, so I'm not that smart. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a doctor. But if you agree to do this for 30 days, these four things, I promise you, you will notice a change. It will change the kind of person you are, and if it changes who you are, it will change the way you present yourself to people. That's part of what we do in the jail. We never go in and tell them why we're going in there. We just teach them public speaking skills. If somebody improves as a public speaker, what happens? Their confidence goes up. How does a person hold themselves if their confidence goes up? Do their shoulders fall forward and their head drop? Or do they put their chest out and feel like they're in control? And what's interesting, and it really works, and it works with people who've been in jail for 10 years, and we only need like 4 sessions, is psychologists will tell you that you can either think your way or feel your way into a behavior, or you can behave your way into a feeling. And so that's what we do with these inmates. Some of these guys have murdered. Damn! He killed somebody, 14 years. And yet if he does, he plays the game in a few sessions, 3 or 4, that person stands out, their chest is out, and they give a speech, and maybe only a 3-minute speech. But you sit there and you say, my goodness, it didn't take 50 years. It just took getting them engaged. And that was something you guys talked about, is you need engagement. So what are those 4 areas? We know that things are going to change here in a dramatic fashion. But do we know what's going to happen? No. One of my businesses is a clinic, a primary care clinic, and I fear for the radiologists. They're smart, they pay their taxes, and they're going to lose their jobs. Because it's only a matter of time that an algorithm will be able to do their job better, faster, for less money. So do I, as a radiologist, wait till that happens? Or do I start to develop myself? And so the basic problem is that we wait till something happens, a crisis, and then we don't have any momentum in our life. And then when it hits us, we lose months and years of time. We don't have months and years of time to live or to lose. So the first area that we know that we need to make, and I teach this to kids, is we've got to make investments into 4 areas in our lives that are 100% under our control, like I said. And if you do this on a regular basis, after a while, 30 days is enough, you will start to see changes. One of them is IQ. Now everybody knows what IQ is, right? So we get it, we understand it, there's a number, maybe we stopped studying when we left school. But I tell you what, things are changing today. Most of the information we use is less than 15 years old. Wow. Now I'm not talking about the laws of physics, but the information we use is less than 15. So at best case, in 15 years, it's no longer valid. So how do I make sure that I don't fall out in this area? Well, one of the easiest way to do it is read. You know, when I was in jail, the first time I was in there and I had 13 or 30 of these kids. They were between the ages of 14 and 18. And I said, how many of you read? Now, there are 30 kids. How many of the 30 kids raise their hand? One. I asked him, what do you read? He says, I read the Tutti Frutti magazine. That ain't a book. So if I can make sure that I'm always depositing, there are so many things. I don't think I'm an early adopter, but I was going through my podcast list today. How many people listen to podcasts? How many do you think you're signed up for? 15? None. Okay, there's room for improvement there. So, anybody else? How many? 4. All right? Easy, cheap, free, always there, delivered to your door. I mean, it's so easy. I listen to 45 podcasts. Some of them, thank goodness, I use an application that I can speed it up 200%, and it takes the silence out, so I can go through an hour podcast sometimes in 20 minutes, and I listen to it. And I'm learning about all sorts of crazy ideas. Now, I'm not smart enough to use them yet, but I store that information, and when I meet somebody, because I develop businesses in technology, and when I meet somebody who can do something with it, now I have something to talk about. I read books that are recommended by Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Now, I'm the silly kind of guy that thinks one day I get to meet Bill Gates in an elevator, I'm not going to talk to him about the weather. I'm going to talk to him about a book recommendation, because I tell you what, that guy ain't where he is because he's dumb. The books that he recommends are incredible. So I am constantly making a deposit in this area. I read, I listen to podcasts, I go to conferences, I work on myself. I want to make sure that whatever information is coming out, I have a rough understanding of. And then I try to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. That's easy, we can do that. The second area that I need to constantly develop is EQ. Who knows what this is? Emotional, right? These are our relationships. So, most people don't do well in life for one very simple reason. They don't feel well. For them, life is a struggle. They get up early in the morning and they hate it. If they had a gun, they would shoot their alarm clock. Because they don't feel well. Now imagine if you start investing in EQ and you start worrying about the relationship you have with people in your family, people you work with. What if you were to go out of your way and 3 people every day, and I do this actually when I'm driving on UW, I make sure when 3 people cut in front of me, the first 3 people I smile at and I say, they probably have somebody very sick on the front seat and they're hurried to the hospital. Does it make a difference? No. Except for me. He's already in front of me. I work hard on making sure my relationships bring joy. That's one of your values for TATA, is joy, to make sure the process is joy. I want to enjoy the process. And so I spend time investing in this, creating relationships, creating tools to be able to network, to find people, new people, and be able to offer. The nice thing about being passionate about speaking is I have something in my hand that I can offer these people. I have CEOs who send me their kids because they want me to give their kids self-confidence. So I immediately have something to talk to them about. So now I'm developing my IQ. I don't do it every other day or every other week. I do it every day. I'm going to make one recommendation for, in fact, I'll make it now. One book. I read a lot, but there's one book I would recommend you read, and it's titled The Slight Edge. It's a thin book written by Olson. It will change your life. So now I make efforts in EQ. Then there's another one called PQ. This is the physical quotient, and this has everything to do with how I feel, what I eat, how much I sleep. Did you see Aetna is giving 50,000 employees an Apple Watch to get their sleep average up to 8 hours, and if they do that, they get the watch and $300. People don't feel well. When they don't feel well, it influences. If you haven't slept well, and you feel horrible after eating too much, and you're never in shape, do you feel like reading? Well, no. You feel like being nice to your neighbor whose dog keeps walking over on your yard? No. So if we take care of this, and I built this into my schedule, does anybody else in here run? A lot? No. No.
I run.
Right? So I'm going to brag about this. I do it. I'm not here to impress you. I run every single morning. Every single morning. I don't run because I like to run. I run because I hack myself on this side. When I leave the running machine or I leave the track, I don't have to worry about how I feel. And it sets me up to be more receptive in this area. It sets me up to be more receptive because when I'm in a good mood, I'm nicer to my kids, I'm nicer to my neighbor, I'm nicer to my colleagues. And then the last one is called a spiritual or service quotient, is I find ways that I can help other people. Now, I take my talent. I'm a big believer that if you have a talent, you need to use that. So I create programs for children and inmates. We've been doing it for several years now. I actually take civilians into the jail and I say, look, if you want an incredible experience for 2 hours, come with me. You don't need my help to get into jail. You need my help to get out of jail. And I take them in there and they sit there with inmates and then 2 hours later their life is changed. I'm also, as I mentioned, I'm also very active with a foundation called Chocolampo. It's for children who have incredibly serious diseases. Now, I'm going to brag a little bit, okay? So I'm going to tell you ahead of time, I'm not Catholic, but I figured out how, and I've taken 2 girls, 2 different cases, to meet the Pope. Not just be in the same room with him, but to shake his hand and have him bless her and exchange a gift. Because I met the right people who were able to push the idea forward. And the first time I did it, the mother whose daughter was recovering from cancer, she was a very devout person, very Catholic. And so she's sitting there in the audience of 7,000 people, and there were 15 people who got a chance to meet the Pope afterwards. And her daughter, Kinga, who she was burying 2 years earlier because she got cancer, is now holding the hand of the only Pope, her daughter, Kinga. I have never met the Pope, but I can tell you standing a meter from her mom was enough of a feeling for me, enough of a charge. So I'm driven by how can I serve others? And this is a part of my lifestyle. This is a part of my lifestyle. This is a part of my lifestyle. And this is a part of my lifestyle. So I read every day. I've got a Kindle, I buy books, I read, I listen to podcasts, I go to conferences. So I'm not that smart, but I'll tell you what, I see things that are changing. And I'm impressed by people that are leading the expo curves like Elon Musk and Peter Diamandis. These guys are insane. I'll never be there, but I'll certainly know about what they're doing. And if you build this into, you make these 4 deposits every single day, it will absolutely change the kind of person you are. I have a friend of mine. His name is John. Years ago, he became a friend after I read his book. I was reading an e-sign or some kind of an email that was sent to me, and I read about this guy who was born with no arms. And I looked at the title of his book, and there he is, John, sitting on the stairs, and he's got one leg over the other, and he's holding his coffee cup with his foot, no arms. And the title of the book is, What's Your Excuse? And I thought, oh. And so I've never done this before. I called the producer, or not the producer, but the publisher, and I got the rights to his book, and then I had it translated, and I published it, and then invited John over here. And John has no arms, and he never will have arms. But he's married, he's got a daughter, he travels the world. He's one of the most content and fulfilled people I've ever seen in my life. And that's because he makes these, he doesn't stop to feel sorry for him. He doesn't blame his parents and file a lawsuit as they do in the US because they got bad genes. And I asked him, John, if I could give you a pill and you could swallow it and your arms would grow out, would you do it? And he says no. He's an incredible human to be around. And so if you go back to the person I started with, my friend 4 years ago, who blamed everything on somebody else, and then you look at John's case, where he's making these inputs, and he's traveling the world, and he's helping others, and he forgets about his own problem, then you realize the only difference between my friend of 4 years ago and John is a decision. It's that simple. It's not digital, it's not complicated, and it's only a decision that you can make. I can't make it for you, your Prime Minister can't make it for you, your CEO can't make it for you. But if you make that decision in just 30 days, look for ways to make small deposits into those 4 areas of your life, I promise you, you'll have more energy and more drive, and more pep, and a better attitude in 30 days than you've experienced